Welcome to another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio, and my guest today is Tim Croll. He is a business growth strategist with extensive experience in e-commerce. But on today's show, we talked about a life-death situation he was in, and it was really all about how he managed fear. Right now, there's a lot of people who are struggling with that, and Tim lays out his 4 principles on how to go about managing fear. If you're interested in those, and I know that you are, you're certainly going to want to hear this story. Stay tuned. Welcome to another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio, and my guest today is Tim Croll. He is a business growth strategist with extensive experience in e-commerce, entrepreneurship, and organizational development. His experience spans from owning a service-based company to building a multi-million-dollar e-com business. But what sets him apart is his ability to communicate a complex business strategy into a step-by-step action plan. He's certified as a coach in ACS, Kid Lead, and holds master's degrees in leadership development. We're going to talk today about personal growth and managing your life. Tim, really appreciate you being on the show, buddy.
Oh man, I'm so grateful for doing this. I have so much fun doing these types of things. I sometimes get irritated with the bio, but it's what it is because everybody wants to know those highlights, those podium moments, and it's like there's so many aspects to me. But anyway,
Yeah, no, I know. I've had bios that I say if I read the whole bio of the person, it would probably take me 15 minutes. So we don't have
yeah,
so I shortchange and cut some things out or whatever. Yeah, when we first talked, we got connected through another podcaster who said, "Hey,
right.
you two guys need to meet each other. You probably get along well," which we have. And we had a conversation and didn't really expect on that first phone call to talk long. We ended up talking over an hour. And just because
Yeah, we
we got
did.
into a conversation and you shared that you had a critical event in your life and said, maybe we want to talk about that story, but it's a little bit long, but it's a really good story. And that's what I want to tap into today. So start wherever you want to with that, and we'll. Uh, I'm
Well, I
sure.
think
I'm
part
sure
of that
enjoy
is I
listening.
got to. Yeah. I kind of have to start in just a little bit of an explanation of where I've come from, and I've always loved the adventure because it doesn't make sense if I don't give a little bit of a
Okay,
background on that.
let's have some backstory.
Yeah, so some of that backstory is we live in northern Michigan. Actually, at the time of this recording, we are expecting multiple inches of snow, and we are expecting that we're probably going to have to be bound in our houses probably for the next 2 days or 3 days because that's just what happens in northern Michigan in the wintertime. So by the time spring rolls around, we get real antsy. We're like, we got to get out of the house. We got to go on another adventure. Like, we have got to do something because our winters are really long and they're cold. And so we kind of get this cooped up feeling. So that's the environment within which I live, right? And then in addition to that, I mean, my soul has always been what's the next adventure? What's the next I don't want to call it risky, but it's kind of like that. What's the next thing that we're going to be able to do to explore, to find something that's really cool, to create, to build, to do something? I mean, I'm always looking for that next adventure. And so that's kind of the background of what it is. And I mean, fast forward and all of this stuff, just so you kind of understand that, is every time that spring hits, we're ready to get out. We're ready to get on the water. We have more water here in Michigan than I think anywhere else. In fact, fun fact for all you trivia guys out there, we are number 2 as far as United States. We are the number 2 state when it comes to coastal property. We have more coastal front.
Really?
We have more coastal front than Florida, anywhere down south. The only one that's larger than us is Alaska. So we have more coastal property, coastal frontage on water than any other state. Now it's all fresh water, and nobody ever counts that because it's all clear, fresh water. But anyway, so we love the water. We love being out on the water. We love kayaking, fishing, all of the activities that happen with the water. So now we start into the story aspect of this, and we're going to talk about mastering fear. We're going to talk about how we go through that, because I think that's apropos for today's age, is so many of us have a lot of fear and anxiety. So it was a bright sunny day after one of these long winter seasons, right? And we decided to take an adventure. And for me, that meant that we are going to do a kayaking adventure. So we get a group of guys together, and we actually went down. It's a Sturgeon River, which is local to us. And I took a lot of the same steps that we take as we approach any adventure. But this adventure, unlike anything else, it kind of had a little bit more of a fear and an anxiety, because there was a couple of things that I was really concerned about. And I'll talk about that as we go. So I'm going to leave this as a little bit of a cliffhanger. But
all right, good.
Yeah, so as we approached this situation, it was really, truly a little bit more challenging, and things moved very, very quickly, to the point where I found myself pinned under a log. And I wasn't sure if I was going to see the light of another sun. It really, truly confirmed a value and a belief that I have in my heart, that I have to live my life in spite of feeling fear. In spite of the risk, I have to continue to live my life. So finding myself pinned under a log, underwater for a couple of seconds, risking the fact that I might actually die on this adventure, embracing the fact that I have to live in that spirit of action instead of living in the spirit of fear, this whole trip, and what led me up to the fact of where I was almost ready to die, has really reinforced that belief. So that's the
yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, you go ahead, because that's the premise. This is where we're at, and I know I'm leaving it on a cliffhanger, because I'll tell you what happened here in a little while.
No, it's great. I number one, just I am absolutely certain the listeners who are not also viewing this can hear your energy and your enthusiasm and your passion as you're going through this. And maybe some of that comes from the fact that, hey, I made it through all this, and I'm here to and I'm here to tell the story. But I think it's more than that. I'm actually thinking that some of that is also what helped you through this situation. That attitude that you probably had, even you had it even before this started. And
yes.
So
it's a way of life. And it's a belief system. So, I mean, at the very beginning of this, we actually have to look at, and before we kind of get in, there's 4 steps. So that way everybody knows where I'm going. There's 4 steps to mastering your fear.
Okay.
And this applies both to your personal life. It also applies to business aspects. It applies to a lot of areas, from personal growth to business growth. There's a lot of different ways that you can really, truly flesh out this whole idea of mastering your fear. But let's first define what fear is. All right, so if we look at that and we go by, whether it's Webster Dictionary, I can't remember where I got this definition, but fear really is an unpleasant emotion, and it's caused by a belief that someone or something is dangerous. And that danger it's likely going to cause some kind of pain. It's going to cause some kind of a threat. It's something there. It's a perceived belief that whatever that thing is, that's what's causing that fear. That's what true fear is, right? So if we flip that coin, the other side of that is courage. And if we define courage, courage is the ability to do something that frightens someone or frightens you. So we make it personal. Courage is the ability to act even when you're frightened. It's strength in the face of pain, or it's strength in the face of grief. So we have basically opposite sides. And these 2 opposite sides can be defined out through our entire lives. Are we going to live in fear, or are we going to live in action?
And this is, I know that emotion oftentimes is defined as a thought running through the body. And so we've got a thought of fear, a certain thought of harm or whatever, that translates into feeling fear. And then the courage is the opposite of that. I've got another thought. And so I'm guessing that you're going to be getting here into intentional thinking at some point, but I'm going to let you tell the story. I'm just trying to project maybe a little bit down. I want to see the curve before I get right up on it.
Oh, that's okay, dude. I love the predictability of things too. But as you look at things, I mean, it's some people define it as being proactive versus reactive. I mean, that's another way that people have looked at it. But at the end of the day, it's a choice that you make on your own. You are going to choose to live in that fear, to be reactive, or you're going to choose to live in the courage and be proactive. because there's a lot of things that fear will do to us. And if we don't learn how to master that, we're going to be, we're going to miss out on a whole lot of stuff that could have been great, that could have been really awesome. So basically what fear does, and if we allow fear to dominate, fear will paralyze, and it will quickly take all of the space that you allow it to take. So think of it like a big black shadowy type giant that's just outside your door. And you get to the front door and you open the door and you see this big black monster giant of a shadow kind of thing that's just looming in front of you, and you decide not to take that step out the front door. So you kind of retreat back to your living room. And as you give that space, that shadow enters into that front door and starts to take up that living room space. And so you continue back into a back bedroom, and you continue back into a closet. And every time that you step back, every time that you be reactive, every time that you allow fear to dominate your thought process, that shadowy figure continues to fill that space. And so as you're looking at this, the reason why, and I want to give people why that you need to really listen to these 4 points. The why is because it will lead you to complete isolation, and it will lead you to a point, if you allow the fear to dominate, it will lead you to a point where you actually never step out of a comfort zone, you never grow, and you never become all that you were intended to be.
And would you also agree that if you make that a habit, stepping back from the fear, that actually the world that you live in shrinks?
It does.
Because you end up getting afraid of more and more and more things in your, okay.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, because we allow that fear to paralyze us. And that's the whole point of this, is if we allow that paralytic type feeling, then we will never act, and we will never do, and we will never become. We'll never be able to experience all the greatness that this world has to offer. And whether that's in the greatness of our relationships, or it's a greatness in a business, or for me, looking at exploring the outdoors and going on adventures, whether it's kayaking down a river, climbing a mountain, whatever that is, we're never going to be able to experience the greatness that is in store for us in our future.
Now, is there any, of course, if we were teaching a class, we would say, is there any pre-work? Is there anything that somebody needs to have done, have developed in advance before they can start managing fear effectively? Like, are there any prerequisites? Like, listen,
there's one.
Okay, all right.
There's just one prerequisite.
All right.
And that's it. And then we're going to go through the 4 steps. So I'm glad. This is a great transition, right? So there's one. You have to make a choice.
All right.
That is the prerequisite. You have to choose. Are you going to allow the fear to paralyze you, or are you going to act in spite of that concern, anxiety, pain, grief? Are you going to act in spite of all of that stuff?
All right. And we are going to come back with Tim Croll and fill in the 4 points that he's been holding out on us for right after this short break. The number one reason why most people are unsuccessful is that they hate doing the work. Man, I don't even want to think about thinking about getting prepared. For those of you who are really struggling with, I don't really want to do the work, I've done most of the work for you. I've made the process easier. All you got to do is pick up one piece of material and everything that you need is there. I guarantee it. I've got thousands of students from my classes who've been successful using this approach. I know it works. You need to up your game. You can do it, but you got to figure out what's the best way for me to do it. You know you need to start preparing now. Everything that I knew over 40 years is in my book and in my interviewing skills online course. Everybody's got a favorite learning style. All you got to do is watch it, read it, listen to it. See ya. And welcome back to Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm speaking with Tim Croll, who has held out on us in the first half of this podcast, talking about the 4 steps that you need to go through to manage your fear. But here they come. Tim, take it away, brother.
Yeah, so we're going to actually break this down. And I love the fact of trying to make things as simple as possible. And you talked about we talked about the prerequisite of just the fact that you have to make a mental choice. But then everybody comes, okay, I want to make the choice to overcome my fear, but I don't know how.
Okay.
And so my goal is to be able to translate and use the story of the time when I almost died here on the river, going down it with a kayak, and understand that you can actually quantify and be able to overcome the fear. And here are the 4 steps. So are we ready? Get your
Yeah,
pen
and
paper out.
let me ask you this question before you get started. When I heard about the 4 steps and you mentioned them as building blocks, I thought, is this something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you need to do number 1 before you do number 2, before you do? Are these in order where you've got to
Yeah.
complete one, or can you do them all at the same time? Or
Well, you have to be able to do them in order.
okay,
But I also would. It's not like when we look at Maslow's hierarchy, there's definitely a break point from one to the other.
right,
What I have found in my own life is that sometimes I'll overcome and I'll do the first step and I'm good with it, and then I forget about it and I might have to go back. So there's like sometimes overlap in some of these things where they just, if you get to that point of like I need to go back to 1, or I need to go back to 2, or I need to go back to 3, like sometimes there's that skipping around thing. So it's not as clear cut as Maslow's hierarchy,
right.
but it's definitely kind of like a process of being able to go through. So the very first one is identify and recognize the real danger. What is that thing that is actually causing the fear? So as we drove up to the Sturgeon River, and I'm standing on the banks of the Sturgeon River, we noticed that the water is going a lot faster than it normally is. And I've kayaked down the Sturgeon River many, many times. And I could feel, as I was standing there, the water's higher, the water's moving faster. And I honestly started feeling the anxiety. Now, like I said, I've kayaked this river many, many times. I'm familiar with it. I know what it is. I know where the turns are. But it's a lot more dangerous. And I could see that. And I realized that in my soul and in my heart, which is where the emotion starts, it's that core, I could feel it, the fear was starting to mount. And in the back of my mind, I started coming up with reasons why I shouldn't get in the river, why I shouldn't go down the path, why I shouldn't be on this action plan. I started coming up with a lot of excuses. It was at that point in time where I had to identify exactly what it was that I was afraid of. And in that situation, I couldn't write it down, but I'm going to tell you to do this. What I would suggest you do is take a minute and write down exactly what those fears are. Because here's what happens if we don't identify and we don't write them down and we don't quantify, is that fears borrow weight from every other fear that's out there. So as you're looking at your life,
I want you to say that again. I really like that statement. Repeat that if you would, if you remember
no
what
problem.
you.
I say it all the time because it's
All right,
true.
good deal.
Fears borrow weight from other fears, right? We were talking at the beginning about the idea of fear and the fact that it's this big shadowy giant that's creeping into every part of our life. And what we don't realize is that if we are concerned, or if there is a fear or something that could cause pain in one area of our life, and then we've got 2 or 3 other areas of our life that are also tying in with that, it's not like the weight of 1 is equal to 1. It's actually like the weight of 1 is equal to 5.
Right.
And you multiply that times 5, and now you got the weight of 25 because everything is weighing down heavier than what it would normally. By standing and quantifying, as I was on the bank because I couldn't write the stuff down, or by sitting down and writing out your fears, what that does is it allows you to put it in a manageable box, to be able to start analyzing and creating a plan.
And it sounds like it's separating the fears, and you're saying this is the one I'm dealing with. All these other fears that jumped aboard, they really don't belong here in this situation. The only one that I'm really being threatened by is this one. So it's an isolating in a way. Okay.
It is 100%. You've got to be able to put it down. And there's something, I would hesitate as far as saying this, but it's almost something that is healing in the way, mentally and emotionally, just by putting it down on paper. There's something about being able to do that because it quantifies and shows you the actual size of the fear, not this big shadowy giant that's creeping into every part of your life, right? And if you don't do this, because the second step is create a plan, right? So, but if you don't do this, there's no way that you can create a plan. Because what you're doing at creating a plan is you're actually looking at fear number 1 and saying, how am I going to either overcome this, make good decisions? How am I going to be able to move forward? That's what creating the plan is. How am I going to be able to move forward if you're trying to plan on 4, 5, 6, 7 different things? It's impossible to do because the plans are going to change between each of those components. So you have a plan to be able to overcome one of those, right? Now, this is really important, and I don't want anybody to miss this. When you're creating a plan, it's really, really important to be good at gathering information. If you don't gather good information, it's impossible to make good decisions.
Right.
It's impossible to create a good plan.
So how is somebody going to know that they're creating or they're gathering good information? So now I'm in this and I'm going, okay, I got to create this plan and I got information coming to me. Is there a qualifier there somewhere? Hey, this is good. No, this is not appropriate. Throw that part out. What do you use there to make sure that what you're gathering is good information?
Yeah, that's a really great, especially in our society today. I mean, we have got a plethora of information.
You got it,
And so
brother.
you have to always be on guard on what information you're allowing to come in and choosing that wisely and backing it up. So I'm going to go back to this whole aspect of our kayaking because there's a couple of things, and I think this relates directly to our personal lives as well as to our business lives. And so what we had to do when we were laying out our plan, and we did this previous to being on the banks, and I felt that anxiety, I went back to the plan that we had started creating, and I looked at a couple of things. Number one, what is the environment? So when we were looking at the river, I would go back and look at the data that said, hey, this river is a little bit higher. It's not at flood stage, but it's getting close to flood stage. There's a certain amount of volume that's coming out of the river. Number two is what equipment do you have? In our situation, we had our kayaks, our paddles, we had our life jackets, our life preservers. We had a bunch of different things that were there specifically to be able to help us navigate the river and also to keep us safe. How much time do you need to be able to overcome or do or act? So we actually had planned the correct amount of time. And I think those are three great foundations when you're looking at how to be able to collect that information to be able to create that plan. One, what's the environment around that information? I mean, is it coming from something that's on the social media aspect where there's really not a whole lot of an environment? It's just kind of free flowing. It's just anybody's thought that's coming from anywhere, or is it actually research study information that's coming up? The equipment that you currently have within. Now, the equipment in our situation was boats and kayaks and paddles and life preservers, but in your situation, it might be something different.
Right.
You know, whether it's your home or your business or cash flow or products. I mean, there's a lot of different things. Assess the equipment that you have, and then how much time do you need to be able to go through with this plan? I mean, it could be a 2-day plan, it could be a 5-day, it could be a 2-year plan, it could be whatever it is, but you assess that based on it. And this is a little bit of a caveat, right? So you only have as much certainty as you can plan for. And that sounds like an odd statement, but the reason why I put it out there is because there's certain things that is impossible to plan for. There's always a certain amount of risk. There's a certain amount of things that are going to be outside of those controls.
You know, it's interesting that you would say it that way, because I know one of the TV programs that I used to watch from time to time was Navy SEALs, or maybe it was just called SEALs or something like that. And they talk about whenever the plan that they had goes awry, what they say is, I'm thinking it's what is in your 5-foot area, or
Exactly.
or it's, I may be off on it, maybe 6 feet, 3 feet, or something like it. But it's like time available. It's like, what is in this immediate environment that you have that you can use? Everything else you need to block out, because you need to operate in this one. This is the only one you need to concern yourself with, which is essentially what you're saying, correct?
That's 100% what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And there has to be an understanding when you step into it that there is always going to be a level of risk. And this is really important for people to understand, because there's two sides of risk. If you allow the fear to dominate, there's a risk of missing out. There's a risk of losing and having those personal relationships. There's a lot of risk by allowing fear to dominate. On the flip side, though, there's still risk. There's still that uncertainty or instability of what the future holds. And so my choice, and again, it always comes down to this choice aspect. Do I want to risk missing out? Do I want to risk living a life of inadequacy, being unfulfilled? Do I want to risk having a meaningless life and existence? Or do I want to take the risk that life has to offer and have that fulfillment? and be able to see and experience and create awesome relationships with people.
You know,
Which risk do I want to accept?
yeah, and it's interesting as you say that, because as you were talking, what I went to is people always think about, hey, if, for instance, if it's a relationship, if I talk to this, I'm afraid to talk to this person and ask them out. Let's say, just for practical sake, if I ask them out, I might get turned down. Well, yeah, that's a risk. But then there's also a risk of not asking anybody and living, and they never worry about that risk. It seems like that.
Exactly.
So I'm really hearing you that they're focusing on the one side, but not really even entertaining the other risk, which is a
Exactly.
balance of the two, like a counterbalance.
So many things in our life are like that. It's
Yeah.
amazing that we always focus on one thing or the other. I mean, at the beginning of this, we started talking about fear or courage. And you either focus on the fear or you focus on the courage. It's one of the two. You don't really have other options, right? And then so as we look at this, the very first thing that we excuse me, the very first thing that we were talking about is just identifying and quantifying exactly what is making you afraid, and then creating that plan. But as you create that plan, you have to understand that, yeah, we're going to take what you said, like in the 5 feet, what's going on around us. You can plan prior, you can plan when you're in the middle of it, when it goes crazy, but we still have to understand that there's going to be a little bit of a level of a risk. There's
Right.
always going to be that part. And that has to be included in the plan. And there has to be an understanding that that you can accept that level of risk. So let me quantify this. For example, if I'm in business and I see an opportunity that's going to cost me $1 million, and I have no funders, no investors, no angel, nothing, and I'm going to just jump out there and say, yeah, I can do this. Well, that would be a dumb risk, because I have zero ways to be able to have that collateral. I have nothing.
Right.
To take $1 million risk, right? And so there's certain things that you have to understand, that their risks are worth it, but there's also risks that are not worth it. And that's part of creating your plan, is just understanding what risks you can accept and take, and then that allows you to grow. So I don't want to go too far down that road, because that's a whole rabbit trail that we could talk about risk assessment.
Yeah, for sure. What's we were at point 2. What's point 3?
So point 2 is the plan.
Right.
And then point number 3 is action. It really only comes down to implementing the plan, and it's all about the action. Because at the end of the day, I can plan things, I can identify the risk, identify the fear, I can put all of this plan together, I can have everything in there, but unless I put my butt in the bottom of the kayak, get in the water and push off the banks, there's nothing. I've got absolutely nothing.
Would you agree that it is at that point? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at the list now. I was thinking as you were talking, Tim, that point is a sticking point or a stopping point for lots of people. They may, and maybe even be earlier than that. Maybe they haven't done any of these. I don't know, but okay, go ahead.
No, I think this is the point where everybody breaks down.
Okay, that's what I was sensing.
Yeah, I would say that the majority of the individuals stop at this point. And the reason is because they all get caught up in the planning, right? So, okay, I agree. I identified my fear, and I'm starting to plan, and I'm planning. And there's always certain aspects of information that you're never going to have, right? So you can sit there and say, well, I don't have all the information. Well, good decision-making is based off of the information you have at that time. That's where we get that difference. And you can never, ever have a perfect plan. And that's where the adaptability component comes into play. But you can never have all of the information. It's impossible until you actually start acting, and you find out that, in my situation, we started finding out very quickly in the action that river was very dangerous, and we had to make some adjustments to our plan. We had one of the guys within the first, I think it was 30 minutes, we had one of the guys who flipped his canoe 3 times, or his kayak 3 times. That kayak had gotten stuck under a deadfall. So let me just pause here. So a lot of people don't know what a deadfall is, but basically what happens is during the winter time, a lot of the banks start to wash out, and we have trees that fall across the rivers, and the water flows in underneath the tree at a very fast pace, but it's got branches and stuff in there. So the water's flowing through, but you can't.
Right.
So you actually have these deadfalls that actually start to bind up. So we have several different volunteers and people that go down through the river, clean them out so that they're nice and safe and whatever. So what we had found out is that they had not all been cleared. There were a lot of them. So we ended up spending a lot of time getting out of the river where these deadfalls were to be able to port back around. One of the individuals actually lost his his kayak underneath of one of the trees. It took us about 30 minutes to be able to get it out safely. And there's a lot of different things, but the whole point of that is the fact that you have to be able to act. Action is the only way to overcome and be able to conquer the fear. It's the only way to overcome and conquer your life. It's the only way to be able to have things and experience things. If we allow the fear to dominate, the fear is going to become larger than life, and it's going to continue to paralyze us.
Yeah,
But
I like what you talked about there in terms of the action step, and I would say that there are a lot of people, and I think about one of the courses that I have is becoming an entrepreneur, and there are so many people that are waiting till they have it may not be fear driven necessarily. Well, though I'm sure there's some of it in there. Starting your own business is a fairly fearful
yeah,
experience for
yeah,
most people, but they want to have the plan completely fleshed out. They want to have answers to every single question that they have. And as a result of that, they never take the first step, which is taking action.
yep,
And so,
that's
so
exactly
you're
right.
saying, you got to gather, but you also got to take into account, the time you have available to act, and that can't be forever. So,
Right. Right. Well, and some of that concept is the whole idea, and we talk about burning the ships. And like it's just I'm going to burn the ships because that's my deadline date. And the concept comes from the fact of this is when I'm going to act on the plan. So I mean, we think about some of the past things in the history and the commitment that you make. I mean, like it's really about burning the ships.
right,
So when we got
right.
we got in our kayaks and we stepped into the water and we pushed off, that kayak was our burning the ship because we can't go back upriver. The only thing we can do is go down to where we can get out, which is another area. We have to get through all of these things. We have to be willing to be able to act in order to be able to find out. And I know that there's risk, and sometimes people are like, well, I don't want to take the risk, but dude, it's so worth it. It is so worth the risk to be able to step out and take that action.
Yeah, and having done some whitewater rafting, not kayaking, I'm not that. I was just say not that crazy. I'm not that skilled to do that. I've never been in a kayak. You're making decisions like this all along. You've got a fearful situation, and you resolve that one. You get another one coming up. You get another,
Exactly.
and it's like this is like a. It's not like you do one and then you're good to go for the whole trip. This is something that is repeating over a period of time.
Right. Well, and it leads us to the fourth point there. I mean, like you're setting me up to like knock it out of
I'm
the park
loving it.
here
I'm
every
loving.
time. So.
We're doing that Vulcan mind meld, brother.
Yeah, I love it. So that sets us up for that fourth one, which is, and I kind of alluded to this, but it's adapting to the changing environment. You have to be willing and adaptable when it comes to overcoming and mastering your fear, right? Because we know, like you just said, especially whitewater rafting or any of the other things, at any moment, we're going to be faced with another opposition. We're going to be faced with another challenge that's going to give rise to the fear inside, but yet you have to be willing to be able to push forward, right? So there's a concept here, and this is something that I really want to stress because so many people fall prey to this. And it's an understanding that at the very beginning, like I said, some of these things overlap. So we're going to go back to point number 2 about creating the plan. And so often, as either business owners, and frankly, it really is one of the things that men have the biggest flaw with, although I've seen it in women as well. Throughout history, we make plans to attempt to control all the results. Yet the power to control all of the results, it still remains outside of the scope of man.
Right.
Because we're not able to control all of society. We can't control the environment. We can't control commerce. We cannot control all of the circumstances that are going on around us. We don't have that power.
And if you believe that you do, and controlling everything is the way to eliminate fear, you're in a loop that is never ending.
It's never going to happen.
It's interesting, Tim, because I can show you this right at the bottom of my sheet of paper. It says, "I am most fearful when I am trying to control too much."
That is so true.
It's just that I realize that there's things that I can't control, and I can get really frustrated and get scared about not accomplishing them if in fact I feel like that's something that I should be able to control, and maybe it's outside of my range of control. So,
and there's so much that's outside of our range of control, right? So, and I mean, when we're looking at this whole idea, this plan of going down and doing our kayak trip, if I would have been able to say 100% I can control every aspect of it, it would have been pretty much a a fallacy, a lie. I just cannot do that because we never know what's going to happen from day to day. We never know when things are going to completely flip out on its head. We don't know supply issues. Man, there's so many applications of this that we have to remain adaptable to the changing circumstances and the changing things that are going on. Now, if we're afraid of being adaptable, this is how we overcome it, is by allowing that control to be outside of our control. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I know that's a little bit confusing and it sounds like double talk, but at the same time, it's really critical to be able to be adaptable. So when we learn that we can be flexible, when we learn that we can adapt to the circumstances and come up with a secondary plan, like I said, they overlap. I might have to come back with a different plan. We might have to do something a little bit odd, a little bit different, think outside the box, use what's in our area, a 5-foot area, all of those things. If we can learn to be able to do that and we can be confident in that, that's going to give us the power to act. It's going to give us the courage to continue to move forward.
And would you agree that the more often you are successful at doing that, that the more courage you will then exhibit the next time you are confronted with another fear?
That's 100% correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 100% correct. Because as you're looking at that, we have, it's like a practicing a muscle. It's an emotional muscle, right? And we kind of talked about this at the very beginning. Like, the more that you focus on fear, that's like practicing that emotional muscle, and that's going to grow, and you're going to be more fearful. On the flip side of that, with the courage aspect, if you practice that muscle is going to grow as well.
Right.
And so you realize it allows you to grow in self-confidence. It puts more tools in your toolbox. It allows you to be more adaptable, but you have to be willing to accept that risk and be able to have the action to be able to step into the boat, to push off of the shore.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like the prescription for people is, start doing this with things that are not life threatening. What things are what things are you afraid of? And then go through these steps of identifying and recognizing just exactly what the danger is, creating a plan through gathering the information, environment, that type of thing. Take action, maybe be available to adapt your plan, but start doing that with some of the smaller things so you start building up that muscle of courage. Before you it's kind of like, don't jump in the deep end and then try to figure it out. Maybe you should start doing this in smaller steps.
Well, there's two things on this point, and I want to express this, and we'll kind of close it down with, I think, these kinds of things. But there's a quote that I love, and it was done by Paul Perino. Most people don't even know who he is, but he wrote in a Wow Factor book, and this is the quote that he said: "I believe everyone has the ability to overcome their fear with a bit of direction and a positive push." And I love that statement because it goes hand in hand with what you just said. There's sometimes I need a little bit of a positive push from somebody, encouraging me to take that action. Sometimes I need a little bit of a direction. Like, how do I actually overcome this? How do I actually handle this situation? All of that is practicing your courage. And as you practice that courage, that muscle becomes stronger.
Right.
That's the one thing. The second thing of this is I made a commitment to myself that I'm not going to allow fear to stop me from experiencing life. And it's a core belief. It's a foundational aspect in my own life. And this has popped up several times in my own scenarios. And I don't know if anybody has actually done any kind of climbing when it's not like cliff climbing, but it's a really steep rock, or you're standing on top of a building and you got to climb down a ladder. And you got to do so when you do that and you look down, if you have any fear of height, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If I stand on the edge and I got to put my foot on that ladder rung, right, the longer I stand on the edge without putting my foot on the ladder rung, the more paralyzed I get.
Right.
Because that fear starts to grow. And as that fear grows, I get well, I know that ladder's safe. I already checked it. I already made sure that it's anchored. I know that it's okay. I mean, I just don't want to take that step.
Yeah, right.
I don't want to get on that first rung.
Right.
And then when I'm on the rung, then it's like, oh, okay, no problem. I got this. I can go boom, 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 and I go right down the ladder.
Yeah.
But it's that first step. It's that first action that is like that paralysis. So I made the commitment in my own life. I will never allow the fear to stop me from an experience. I don't want to have that regret. So my wife and I, we were in Red Rock out in Las Vegas, and we were taking a hike, and it's called it's called Icebox Canyon, and it's a boulder type hike. And so we went all the way back up, and there's this little tiny waterfall that's way up there, and there's a little bit of a scramble to get up on it. It's a little bit of it's not cliffy, but it is definitely steep to get up there. And I climbed up there, no problem, because you just scamper right up. It's no issues whatsoever. Get up there, see this cool little trickle of a waterfall in the middle of a desert. I thought, man, this is awesome. Turned back around and looked down, and my wife is like 30 feet down on this little scramble. And I thought, I got myself in a position here.
Yeah.
But it was in that exact moment, too, that I also realized, and I was able to analyze and put this little thing in the box. If I stand here and I don't act, and I give into that fear, and I try to think of too many things here, I'm not probably going to get down here because I'm going to get scared, and I'm going to not. I mean, a big guy like me is like, what do you mean you get? Yeah, I was like, dude, I don't want to fall 30 feet down, break a leg, and not be able to get out of this icebox canyon. So I had to make sure that I did a quick analyzation. I created a quick plan, and then I had to take that first step very quickly. And for me, it was like I just had to turn around, and when you turn around going down, it's actually easier to scamper down when you're crawling backwards instead of trying to go with your head forward.
Right.
But it's that kind of concept. Now, I'm using things that people can relate with, right? Like the height and the scampering, and people have done these kinds of things. But it's just, in business, it's not that much different. We just have to analyze it. We just have to quantify it, create that plan, and take that first step. And then just be willing to adapt to whatever's coming our way.
Yeah, and I think in that last step, we talk about adapting. I think there are times when people will go through the first 3 steps and they take action, and then it's not working out the way they want, and they feel like I've failed, as opposed to say, I'm closer to the goal now than I was before. I just need to it's almost like in anything that you do, you don't go directly there. You got to adjust a little bit right, adjust a little bit left, or whatever, to get there. And so they are, in my terms, misinterpreting what happened. No, you didn't fail yet. You fail if you stop. And then you go back to your fears, borrow from other fears, and now I've got all kinds of. All I've got to do is adjust a little bit. But what the first step that I took, it's almost like I don't know the whole plan. Going back to your second point, I don't know the whole plan. I just had to take the first step. When I get to the end of the first step, maybe I'll figure out the second step. But there's no way I can see the second step unless I've already taken the first step.
Oh, that's so true. I mean, that is so true. And don't forget to add in there, that little bit of direction and that positive push.
Right.
That encouragement. Sometimes we get to that second step and it's like, oh, dude, I'm stuck. And you just need somebody to be able to say, look, there's a foothold. It's down 3 inches down and 2 inches to the right, and just move your foot over and you're going to be fine. Well, because they can see a different perspective, and they need to give you that positive push just to be able to go that way.
Right. And you talked about getting stuck, so let's get back. You're stuck under the tree. Let's go back to where you were at the beginning.
You want to resolve this?
So far you took me down a river and you put me on a cliff. So truly, it's a cliffhanger right now.
It is. That way we get people to listen to the end of the show and from the beginning of the show.
I want the end of the story. So how did it all work? Obviously, it worked out.
So as we're going down, basically we had been getting out multiple times, and I was in the very back doing cleanup and follow up and making sure that everybody was getting and doing where they were going. We hear from the front, hey, we got to get out. We got a port. It was kind of what everybody was calling. So we got a port. So I had a kid right in front of me. He was a teenager at the time. I'm just going to call him Pablo. That was his nickname. And so he was like, okay, we're going to shoot to the side. And so Pablo went out to the side and he got out fine, but we realized that it was a deeper area. And so as we were going up to the side there, I was right behind him, and the water's again moving really, really fast. And so as the water's moving fast, Pablo didn't get out fast enough, and the water took the back end of my kayak back around. And when it does that, what it does is it bumps up against the tree trunk, and then it starts to push in this case, it was my left side, because that's the way I was turned. It pushed up the left side, and as soon as you push up the left side of a kayak and the water's flowing from the right, you're over. It's going to go over.
Right.
It's just what's going to happen.
Right.
Because there's so much weight of the water pushing, and it flips you immediately. Normally, it's not that big of a deal. In our situation, it was just a smaller trunk, and usually you just pop and you go out the other side, or you just hang on to the tree trunk or whatever. In this situation, we have things that tie or connect our kayak paddles to the actual kayak itself. It's called a tether. When I flipped, that tether somehow wrapped around my legs 3 times.
Mm.
And immediately I am connected to the kayak, and all of the weight of the water is pushing not only on me personally, but it's also pushing against the kayak.
Right, right,
I can't move my feet.
right.
I'm dragged underwater within a half of a heartbeat, and all I can think of is, how do I get air?
Yeah.
So that whole idea of the flash before your eyes kind of a thing,
Yeah.
that wasn't where I was at. I just was, how can I get air? And so I was literally looking for the light, because that's what, you look for the light for the sky. And I found the light, and again, things happen so fast that you just don't realize what you're doing at times. And I reached up, and for some reason, and again, I think it's a miracle, and I think God had his hands in it, or angels were there. And I reached up, and I was able to grab onto a tree branch that was sticking out there. And I was able to get my head just above water, barely. And I found another branch for my other arm. So I'm literally stuck there, hanging on with my right hand and my left hand,
Pinned.
with my head just barely above water.
Yeah. The water pins you.
100% it pinned me.
Yeah.
And I just barely got my head up above water. And then the kayak is being sucked under. It's actually pinned underneath of everything. And all these things are going on. I can't move my legs to be able to help get myself out of water. And so there's a couple of things that happen very, very fast. And I don't exactly remember that, but obviously my adrenaline's kicking. Like, we're just kicking here because I don't want to die.
Right.
I mean, nobody really wants to die. And so I'm sitting there. If I would have been by myself, for sure, I would have been a goner. So Pablo, who's there, he realizes what's going on. He grabs the end of the kayak that's sticking up out of the water and starts pulling the weight off of that. But that takes every ounce of his strength to be able to not have the kayak pulled underneath of that. And then obviously with me alongside that.
Right.
So then my middle son, Zach, who was with me, he was down the river about 20, 30 yards. And I said, dude, I need help. Like, I can't move. And Pablo over there, he's yelling. He's like, help, help. So we've got a lot of this stuff going on. My son, he drops his his kayak, and then he runs right up. He's straight up. And he comes out on the log, which was kind of dangerous, but obviously I'm dying, so he's going to do that anyway. Right. And he was able to actually look at that, and he said, Dad, I can't do anything. And that's when we had to pause. Now, keep in mind, it all falls into this whole fear, and it falls into the fact of making a plan and adapting with what's going on. And in that exact moment, if I would have allowed the fear to consume me, I would not have gotten out of that situation.
Right.
So I had to take a breath. Now, to me, it felt like it was an hour breath. I'm sure it was about 2 seconds. It was just like a blink. But I actually had to calm myself down and analyze what the heck is going on. Because at that moment, I didn't know that my legs were wrapped. I didn't know that the kayak was being pulled. I didn't know that Pablo was pulling on the backside of it. I didn't know any of that stuff. I'm just like, I can't breathe. I need to get my head above water.
Mm-hmm.
Solve that first thing. Now, the second thing is, Dad, I don't know what to do. So we had to pause. And with the intensity of everything else that was going on, we had to say, okay, what is exactly holding me down? And that's when I realized at that moment, like, I can't move my legs. The cord is wrapped around my legs. How do we get out of this? So it's like, Zach, the cord's wrapped around my legs. I can't move. Okay, Dad, I can't reach it. Second problem. Okay, let's see what we can do to solve this. So I ended up being able to raise, and I could bend my legs at the knees, but I couldn't bend anything else. So I was able to bend my knees, and it was able to bring it up enough so that he could actually reach in and untangle the cord. Once he was able to reach in and untangle the cord, then it was easy peasy.
Right.
Because now I had my legs. I could actually get up on the log. He walked back in. I could walk back in, but I kid you not, I probably spent 15 minutes sitting on the bank, allowing my adrenaline to stop kicking.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. I've flipped over in a raft in rapids before. Haven't gotten trapped under a tree limb, but I am very aware of how that happens, and it happens in an instant. There's no doubt about it. And glad that you were calm enough in your mind to go through those steps when you really needed it, because it's easy to panic at a time like that. And when you can't breathe and you know what's happening to you. If you were the first time on the river, you may not have even known what's going on, but you're aware of the danger. I know I can get trapped under these. And so that assessment, that quick assessment, thank God that you did it, and I'm sure you did have, heavenly help in there somewhere.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind, and especially now my son brags about the fact I got to save my dad's life. So he actually tells that story in a totally different manner.
He's gonna cash in on that multiple
for
times.
Sure, all his life he's gonna cash in on that. But let's I want to bring up one point about actually 2 points about this. Number one is the fact we talked about the fact of flexing and practicing this muscle,
right.
This courage muscle. If I wouldn't have been doing things prior and acting and allowing myself to calm down, if this was the first time I was in a life and death situation, I would not have been able to do that.
Right.
So I had to do all these little steps up to that. And that's where in this situation, it helped save my life. And your situation may not be nearly as dramatic as that, but there's still things that you can do to be able to build that courage muscle and to be able to calm yourself down when you're in the middle of chaos, in the middle of a frantic situation. You still can do that. That's number one. And then number two, you need a community of support around you. Remember when I said about that little bit of direction and that positive push?
Right.
If you don't have that solid community that has your back, so to say, it's really tough to go this on your own. This life is that hard, and you got to have the community.
Yeah, it's interesting how the term personal growth doesn't necessarily isolate you by yourself. You can grow personally with having other persons help you with your growth. So it's almost like, it's almost like when you read that, it's because I got to do it on my own. And I really like that as a ending point, that, there's nothing wrong with asking people for help to, whether it help you figure things out, help share information with you that you're not aware of, share with you your strengths, things that you're, to get to know yourself a little bit more, but to have somebody who you can count on, who is going to give you good information to help give you that little bit of a push. I think a lot of people shy away from that, and I wish people would get over that. That's not a weakness. That is a strength, to surround yourself with people, with a community of people who can help you grow and become the person that you want to be. So what final thoughts do you have, Tim, with want to leave the listeners with?
These questions, I love these questions and I hate these questions, because it's just like, I want to make it unique and available to individuals, but I know that each individual is going through a little bit different circumstances. The one thing that I always like to end on and share this one thought is, no matter where you are, no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. And if you know and believe and understand that you're not alone, there's a lot of support available. But if you fall prey to that belief that you're the only one going through whatever it is, that fear, if you fall prey to that, that's the only crippling and traumatizing, and the only thing that's truly fatal is that belief that you're alone.
Right. And so, taking your principles back into account, it would be act on the step of searching for others around you that can help you through this journey. And as we talked about at the beginning, this is such a timely topic, Tim, because we know that there are so many people right now that are really struggling. Reach out. You're not alone. There is support out there. All you've got to do is reach out for it. So fabulous. Love. Finally got the story out of you. Glad that we did. Glad that you made the decision that you did. And kudos to your son for helping you out. Even if he cashes in a couple of times, he probably deserves it and everything. Tim, how can people reach you if they want to reach you and find out more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, the best thing is my website. Everything is linked through my website, and it's just my name. It's Tim, Tim, and then the last name is Croll. It's Croll. So it's timcroll.com, and you can email me there. You can send me information. You can find out my book recommendations. You can connect LinkedIn. You can do all kinds of stuff through that website.
Sounds good. Tim, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. It was exciting. However many minutes we spent, it was fun. You had me on the edge of the seat, literally and figuratively.
Oh, it's good stuff, man. It's good stuff. I really want to hear from the listeners, though. I really, truly do. I want to hear about your decisions, how you're overcoming. So please reach out to me on that point, because I really want to hear about them. I love those stories.
Sounds good. And folks, that's it for another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I want to thank you for watching. Until next time, stay cool, have good thoughts. See you.